Good morning. My name is Andrea Smith. I'm so glad that you are worshiping with us live stream right now. And I hope you were able to check out that video. There was a lot of important information in that. Today, we are going to talk about the positivity and the power that we have of our own positivity. We are in our summer message series. Is it baggage or luggage? Baggage is what we leave behind. Baggage is what is in our past. And luggage is what we carry into our future. So we are talking about the power that we have within us. The person of Jesus Christ, he told us, Jesus the Christ told us about the power that we have. And so why don't we claim it? Like, why don't we spend time and intentionality thinking about what we can do to make our lives all that they were created to be. And believe it or not, we were created to be happy, to be at peace, to be full of joy. And it just seems like we get caught in these negative spirals. So we today are going to dive into the power of positivity. We're going to do this in like a two-part series. We're going to do today and next Sunday, and then we're going to follow up with just the power of habits, period, because all three things actually tie together. So I'm really excited for what we're going to talk about today. If you are newer to the West community, we are so glad that you are checking us out. I would love to know that you're worshiping with us online this morning. If you type your name in the chat room as you listen, or if you are watching on demand, and we'd love for you to come back and just let us know that you worshiped with us today by sending an email to info@headingwest.org. We have a gift for you that we would like to send to you. So if you would just text the word welcome to the number that you see on your screen, or grab your mobile device and I'll read that number to you in about 15 seconds. But if you text the word welcome, we have a gift to send to you. We'll follow back up with you, send you the gift, and then you can choose whether or not you opt in to future communications from us or not. We have daily meditational thoughts and devotions that are going to start coming out this week for this series. So I really invite you to let us know that you would like to receive those. The number that you text is 704-343-8955. 704-343-8955. So as we watch and listen to this next song, I want to invite you to think about something. How, on a scale from 1 to 10, how positive do you think you are? Like that whole glass half full, glass half empty analogy. Are you a half full person, or are you a half empty? Years ago, we went to Aruba with a friend of ours, and she worked for the airlines, so she got to fly for free, and so she came with my family on vacation. It was the first time we'd ever gone anywhere really, like that exotic, so we were so excited to go, and I'll never forget, we stepped out of the hotel and walked down to the beach, and then we just took pictures. It was like one of those postcard moments. And then we started walking back, and she's like, "I'm just so sad." And I'm like, "Sad? We just got to Aruba. We are here for 7 days, and this place is fun. And what? You're sad?" And she's like, "Yeah, but in 7 days it's going to be over." And then like the next day, she's like, "Oh, we only have 6 more days." And so finally, like midweek, I'm like, "Okay, look, I love you, but I don't want to think about my vacation as in, oh, we only have this much left. I want to think about it as, oh, we've got this much left. Like, we've got 3 more days that we get to be together. We've got 2 more days." I said, let's reframe the way we look at it. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm like a half full all the time kind of person, but it was in that moment that I realized how we think about things really matters. And so whereas today we're going to talk about some psychological mindsets and ideas, we also are going to tie them into our faith, because the Apostle Paul, who is responsible for like 2/3 of the New Testament scriptures, he planted churches. He was one of the earliest followers of Jesus the Christ. He tells us that we have a responsibility and we have an opportunity to claim what is good. And he gives us some really wise insight. So we're going to be sharing some words from the Apostle Paul today as well. So I'm really glad you're here, and I hope you find meaning and transformation in today's message. Okay, so I asked you, and if you're watching on demand, you don't know what I asked. So I want you to think for just a second, on a scale of 1 to 10, how positive of a person are you? And I know it's an old analogy, but are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person? And are we really honest with ourselves about that? Like, we want to be a glass half full person, but are we? How do we look at things? So this morning, that is what we are going to be talking about, the power of positivity. And honestly, even if we think we are a positive person, we probably all have room that we can grow and change. So I really invite you to listen to what we're going to talk about today. Today is a little more scientific. Like, I'm going to share with you research and things that scientists have come up with. Then I'm going to talk to you about our faith and what our faith says about it. Next week, we're going to talk more about like the actual semantics of how to do what we're going to talk about today. Like, how do we put it into practice? So it is a part 1 and a part 2. Part of what has to happen today is I need to convince you that, believe it or not, we are not geared or wired to be very positive. Like, we tend to rest on the negative. Dave and Wayne and I, the worship production gurus that are here with me in our live studio, we were talking during the song, and I'm like, do you know that, scientists say that we have between 50 and 70,000 thoughts a day? I mean, think about it. Everything we do is we think. We have between 50 and 70,000 thoughts a day. And research shows that 80% of those are negative. 80% of our thoughts are negative. And that's just with your average human being. Dave laughed and he said, well, yeah, at least. And I'm like, that's true. Like, I started paying attention to my thoughts this morning as I was driving in, and I noticed, just mundane thoughts about just the mere semantics of my day. The way that I was thinking about them was negative. Like, I have a meeting this afternoon around 2 or 2:15, and I have some anxiety around that meeting. It's not one that I'm necessarily looking forward to, but it's one that needs to happen. It's a conversation that needs to happen. And so, but my thoughts around it were not like, oh, I'm so glad we're finally going to sit down and have this conversation. My thoughts were, I don't want to do that today. I don't want to have that meeting. I want to stay at home. I want to go out and float on the lake. I want to do all those things. And so all my thoughts around that were negative. And then, like, just as I was driving, I'm like, I should have left sooner. I blah, 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 blah. And actually, the technicians, they had all the pictures like by 7 a.m. That's unheard of for me. So, like, there were ways that I could have thought about things very positively. But honestly, we all are wired and geared to just look at more of the negative. So what I want us to realize today is that by being a person of faith, and whether you are or not, there's still some truths in this message today, but by being a person of faith, we have been promised that we have this power within us, the power of the Holy Spirit, that we can change, and we can gear our lives toward being different. And salvation, the word salvation means transformation. And so how could it be if we transform who we are? And what if we can change even just, 1% of our negative thoughts to being more positive thoughts? How could that make us better just in the way that we go through life? So what we're talking about today, it is real. This is not just stuff I've made up. If you Google studies on positivity, there are so many, and not just done by psychologists, they're done by scientists. And one of the key things that we have to remember from the very beginning, and this truly is a pivotal lesson and something someone taught me years ago. And so now when I'm counseling with someone that's getting ready to go through a pretty difficult physical journey, I will remind us of this. Our bodies, believe it or not, they hear every thought that we think. Like our cells inside our bodies, they experience the ramifications of our thoughts. Now, I wish I were a scientist and I could go into a lot more detail, but like when we think negative thoughts, there are certain chemicals that are given out in our bodies, and they cause us to feel one way. When we think positive thoughts, like those endorphins, when we think positive thoughts and we do positive things, the exact opposite happens. And what we need to be most mindful of is that, like, when we start down that spiral of negative thoughts, if we don't catch ourselves, then they just start getting more and more and more. And we're going to talk a little more in detail about that in just a minute. I want to show you a picture this morning. This is a basketball player who is blindfolded. And this gentleman is representative of a study that was done by Harvard University. They were doing a study based on positive and negative thoughts and expectations. So they had multiple people in this study, and first, they had a young woman, and she had 10 free throw shots. She stood on the free throw line and shot the basketball 10 times. Now, she missed all 10 times. She was not feeling very confident about her basketball abilities. So she missed them all. Then they put a blindfold on her, and they had a group of people around her, and she couldn't see whether it was going good or bad. And her reactions were based only on what was happening around her. So she shoots the ball the first time. I watched this study. She shoots the ball the first time, and it actually does get closer to the backboard than any of the other shots that she shot when she didn't have a blindfold on. And so the crowd around her, they erupted. They're like, "Oh, wow, that's so good. That's so good. You're so close." And so now keep in mind, all of her shots right now have a blindfold on. So she gets ready to do the second shot. She takes the second shot, and it hits the rim. You can hear it hit the rim. Now, it did not go through, but the people around her told her that it did. They're like, "Yes, you made it. You made it. You made that shot." And so she continued to shoot. Every time they told her that she made the shot other than like 2 or 3. So she went from making none to, and she actually did make like 3 or 4 shots, but they told her she made 7. And then they took her blindfold off again. Same place, same line, and she shoots again. And she makes about 4 or 5 of the shots. Now, what does that tell us? So the scientists and the conclusions of the study said that, like, okay, so she takes the first shot and it's really bad. So her mental self-talk started. And I'm sure it was probably something like, okay, that was really bad. You're not even close to the goal. That was an air ball. So she shoots again. And as you watch her take those first 10 shots, they get progressively worse. Every time she takes a shot and she misses, the next shot ends up worse. It's almost like she was going backward. And by the end, it was as if she had never touched a basketball at all. Honestly, they were air balls. Then she puts on the blindfold. Now, her skill, nothing magical has happened. No big miracle has happened, that some magic has occurred in her body and she has this phenomenal basketball power. But she puts on the blindfold. She takes a shot. she gets positive encouragement from the people around her, and it changes the way that she thinks about it. And so then she continues to shoot. They tell her she makes it. She continues to think positive things. And then ultimately, then they take the blindfold off. By this time, she thinks, I can do this. I've got a chance at this. And so she takes the shot. She gets close. She takes another one. She makes it. Look at the difference that happened in the way that she thought about it. And you know what? That is true for each and every one of us. We don't have to be basketball players. The Apostle Paul, like the scripture that I'm going to read near the end of the message, like the synopsis of it is, don't give in to evil. Overcome evil with good. Negative thoughts, those are evil. They are not where we need to abide. They're not where we need to stay. They're not what we need to rest our minds on. So I want you to take a look at this picture. Perhaps this is not the Starbucks on 150, but could look like that on any given morning. You see a place and a drive-through line, and the drive-through line goes all the way around the building. Now, if you were in one of the cars that's curving around, what would be going through your thoughts right now? Like if you drive up and you're in this long line, what do you think? Or if you're stuck on 77 and you don't want to pay the $4 toll fee for that one particular exit, I'm fascinated with the price fluctuation of the toll fees on 77. But like if you're sitting there, what goes through your mind? Or if you get in the grocery store line and there's like people that are really slow in front of you, what do you think about? Are your thoughts like, well, I'm so glad I'm stuck in this drive-through line. Now I have some extra time. I can listen to the radio. I can make a phone call. I can do this. I can do that. Or is it, I don't have time to do this. Why are they so slow? Why do they not have any help? Blah, blah, blah. Like, do you focus on the positive, or do you stay stuck in this negative mindset? 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. 80% are negative. I want to challenge us this week, every day. We do not have time to sit down and write down all 50 to 70,000 of our thoughts. But I would love for you to notice just almost every hour, what is one of your thoughts? What are you thinking about right now? And is it positive? Or is it negative? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that also is a scientific thing. Think about a polygraph test. That's something that they give somebody if they're testifying in a trial, a lie detector test. When they take this test, it's measuring their body's reaction to the things that they are saying. And what they have found is that if they're not saying truth, that their body is reacting negatively. They start to sweat, their heartbeat increases, their blood pressure rises. Thinking negative things really does affect our bodies. So what is the picture that you now see on your screen? You see these two little critters. What are those? They're ants. The next time that you see an ant, I want you to remember that ANT represents something that each of us have. And some psychologists did this study, and he talked about how he was doing therapy one day for several clients, and he said the first one was a young man who was contemplating death by suicide. And then the next two clients were individuals that were either addicted to drugs or alcohol, trying to lessen their mental anguish and their pain. And the fourth gentleman was someone who was in extreme debt because of some really unfortunate situations that his family faced. And this gentleman said that, by the end of doing therapy with all four of those individuals that day, he left to go home. He walked in his kitchen, and it was just overcome by ants. And they were everywhere. And it occurred to him as he was cleaning up the plethora of ants that that was what he had dealt with all day. ANTS. Automatic negative thoughts. Believe it or not, it is a little bit how we're wired. Like, for whatever reason, we just tend to think automatically negatively. Automatic negative thoughts. For real, like this meeting that I've got today, all morning, and I should have known better because, like, I've known that I was preaching about positivity or speaking about positivity for weeks now. All day, all morning, I was begrudging it. And I'm like, this, I don't want to go, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, as I got here and I spent some time in prayer before the message started, I'm like, why am I not looking at that as a positive? Like, I've wanted to be able to have this pathway and this conversation for a really long time. So it's an opportunity. Look, we all do that. It's not just me. Automatic negative thoughts. And once we think one, then we start to think another, and then we start to think another, and there is this legit spiral. And when we start thinking the negative thoughts, then this negative energy starts going through our bodies. And remember me saying that it impacts our cells, like stress and stress, poor health. It is a real thing. Back when I first started ministry at Williamson's Chapel, it was a huge shift in my time and my focus. And we had moved, and Lane started kindergarten. Andrew was in second grade, and I did not know that the size of the church was what it was when I took the job. And it was just the senior pastor, me, and a youth pastor, and there were like 500 or 600 people every weekend in worship. And the lake area was growing, the job was growing, the church was growing. They were in this building campaign, and I have 2 kids in a school, and it was just like, oh my goodness. And I'll never forget, after every Christmas and every Easter, it was like clockwork. I would have a fever. On the day after, I would wake up with a fever, and undoubtedly that whole week off that was always vacation back then, I'd end up sick. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I sick this same time every year? Then later on in ministry, I learned to have some healthier boundaries. And it's okay if you don't have 5-night meetings every week and those kinds of things. And all of a sudden, I noticed that, like, we'd go on Christmas vacation and I wouldn't be sick. Or Easter would come and go and I wouldn't have any illness. And I'm like, oh my gosh. All those years, it was stress. It was stress. It was like clockwork. It's true. The thoughts that we think and the ways that we think, it impacts our bodies. And if we want to be healthy, then literally we need to focus on trying to be happy. And being happy can be a habit. But it means that we have to stop doing things that we've always been doing. So the ants that you see on the screen, like, if you ever watch ants move, they follow a pattern. We do too. We follow patterns. But the good news is, like, we can change those patterns. I think if the field of psychology had been around as defined back during the time of Jesus and his disciples and Paul, they would have tied the two ideas together because they're so important. Now, I want you to jot down in your phone or on a piece of paper or something near you the word ants, A-N-T-S, and then the next time you see an ant, I want you to think automatic negative thought. And then stop. Like, I don't want to have automatic negative thoughts. And now I want you to take a look at these 4 letters that you see on the screen. These mean relative weight of importance and duration. RID. relative weight of importance and duration. Now let's put that in like everyday language. I wish, and in all my studies, I listen to different podcasts and that kind of stuff. So I've probably listened to 10 or 15 different messages or podcasts this week on positivity and faith and sermons on positivity. And one of the messages said, it's important that we don't think God does things to us. And I'm like, great, I love that. And then they went on to say, we need to always think God does things for us. And at first I was like, okay, wow, God doesn't do things to us. God does things for us. And then I started thinking about some people in my life that I'm praying for right now. And one just has a really crappy health diagnosis that honestly is just unfair. And my heart hurts for them, and I'm worried about them and for them. And I just couldn't reconcile in my mind that God didn't do this to them, but what they're going through right now, God did for them. That makes no sense to me. Or another family that's trying to have a baby, and they've wanted a baby for so long, and they've tried so hard, and they've just been unable to do that. God's doing that for them. If we talk about God being a God of love and a God that holds all things together, we have to be really careful when we start talking about theology that makes God do things to or for us. And honestly, if you're saying God does things for us, you're almost saying God does things to us. Now, we do believe that the power of good, the power of God is at work in our world. Somehow, the power of prayer connects to all that. But prayer are our thoughts, and our thoughts convey energy. So that's why we do say, like, it's important to pray for things to send those thoughts and that energy, that positive energy. And I think it's okay to understand that we also believe that there's this thing called free will, and that God's not a giant puppet master and we're puppets on a string, and things happen. Bad things happen. Bad diagnoses happen. Horrific things happen. God's not necessarily doing those for us. We believe that God is in all things with us. So I would like for us to think that God doesn't do it to us or for us, but God is in it with us. And we are told by the Apostle Paul that God works all things for the good of those who love God. Like, all things, no matter how bad, and probably that's what that person who said for meant, but no matter how bad they are, God can work good out of them, even if they are what seems like the worst things. But how we think about those worst things, it's important, and that's where that word rid came in. The relative weight of importance and duration. So the next time that something happens to you, when you find yourself thinking negatively about it, I want you to ask yourself, okay, so how important is this situation? And then Stephen Covey, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he has like two circles, a circle of influence or a circle of concern, like what can you only think about and or a circle of control and a circle of influence. What can you control and what can't you? And those things that you can't control, guess what? They shouldn't have a really high RID factor, a relative weight of importance and duration, because we can't control them. So why would we continue to think about them? Why would we continue to ponder them? If we cannot control them, then we need to let it go. And the way that we do that is like we stop that thought. So this sounds weird or existential or just a little funky, but hear me. if we're going to change and we're going to think about things differently, and if we're going to have this life that we've been promised from God that we can have, we have to learn how to identify our thoughts. Like, we have to start thinking about thinking. And that's probably weird, and we may not want to do that. But if we want to change how we feel, if we want to change our stress levels, if we want to lower our blood pressures, if we want to be healthier and happy human beings, we've got to start thinking about how we think. And so the next time that we start thinking something negative, we have to call ourselves out. Would you let somebody say really bad things about you and you just be like, oh, okay? Like, I wouldn't. If somebody, like, I can be pretty even keel for a long time, but if you start saying things that are untrue about me or a situation, I'm going to weigh in. I'm going to be like, okay, here are the facts. So odds are you wouldn't let someone just go around and bash you and say untrue things about you. So why do you let yourself do that to you? Because those negative thoughts that spiral out of control, that's what that is. That stuff isn't true. And we have to step back and we have to look at our thoughts and think, okay, are these things that I am telling myself right now, are they true or not? And then we have to stop. And we have to change and pivot the way that we're thinking. I'm not kidding when I tell you that I really want you to think this week about how you think. I want you to stop and notice, like, are you thinking positively right now or are you thinking negatively? Because what we what we think creates our own reality. I want you to think about that for just a second. What we think, be it positive or negative, it creates our own reality. That may sound new age, but it's really scientifically true. And even the people of faith, they thought that too, because Paul says things like, don't let evil drive you. Don't be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. That's really important. So here's the challenge. The next time you start thinking something negative, instead of, bashing yourself for thinking something negative, give yourself some grace. Recognize that, okay, we make mistakes. Okay, there are some bad things that happen, but look at this statement now on your screens. I am always evolving. I'm always evolving. Every moment of every day, we have an opportunity to choose how we go about life. And if we'll stop ourselves in those negative spirals down, and change the path, life will be different. But we have to give ourselves grace. We have to recognize and remind ourselves that we're always evolving. We don't have to get it all right. Every moment is a new opportunity. But that's hard to do. And that's why next week alone, the whole message is going to be very practical things that we can do to make our lives be different and feel different. I want you to take a look at the image that is on the screen. You see a car and you see that it's stuck in ruts. That is what our negative thoughts are like. They are like these huge ruts that you see on your screen. I want to show you another picture of some ruts. I think this is what Cornelius Road and Bluefield Road is like because of all the construction. When I had a smaller car, I finally traded in my Mustang because it was old and I couldn't even hear to make a phone call on the phone while I was driving because it was so noisy. But when I'd get on Cornelius Road, I could tell if I was not in the ruts because the car would start to wobble and it'd start moving all over the road. Ruts are dangerous. And if we're not careful, we really get stuck. And they can lead us in really, really bad directions. I want to show you one more picture of ruts. Sometimes ruts are good if they provide you protection and safety, like if you're in snowstorm ruts, like and you're going that way and you need your tires to be in the path. But guess what? Unless people are willing to get out of those already created ruts and drive on other parts of the snow is never going to go away in some places, like because there's no scraper, there's no this. So like I live off State Park Road. And so if you turn down State Park Road and you go and then you turn left on Wildlife Road, there's this patch of road that never, ever gets direct sunlight. So unless the temperature goes up a ton, the snow will stay there for days and days and days. We actually had a snowstorm this past winter, and believe it or not, the snow was still there 5 days later. The only place that you could see the road was where the ruts had been and where cars kept driving in those ruts. Now, there was a similar patch of road on State Park Road, but guess what? There, cars had driven all over, like they'd driven in the middle and they'd driven in the ruts, and they were always creating new ruts. And so even though on State Park Road, the sun never hit it, it was the same temperature, everything else, but because people were willing to drive outside of the ruts, they created additional pathways for other people. That's what happens with our thoughts. If we will get out of our ruts, if we'll get out of the negative thoughts that we have, we can create new pathways. I want you to focus on this image, meditate on this image as I read these words to you from the Apostle Paul. He was writing to the church in Rome. Love from the center of who you are and don't fake it. Run for dear life from evil. Hold on for dear life to what is good. Be a good friend who loves people deeply. And practice playing second fiddle. Realize you don't always have to be first. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Be alert, servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant, and don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help other people, and be inventive in hospitality. Bless your enemies. No cursing under your breath. Laugh with your happy friends when they're happy and share tears when they're down. Get along with one another and don't be stuck up. Make friends with no ones and nobodies, and do not be the great somebody. Don't hit back. Discover beauty in everyone. If you've got it in you, get along with everybody, and don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, says God, and I'll take care of it. So coming out of a pandemic, so this week was annual conference. It's the yearly Methodist meeting of preachers and laity, the people that are not preachers in the churches, and it was up at Lake Junaluska, and so I was up there for part of the time, and then the other part of the time I followed all the sessions online, and they were talking about rebuilding the church. That the church is just not what it used to be. And several of my friends and I were chatting, folks I haven't seen in like 3 years. And one dear friend wrote me yesterday, and she's like, so how's West? And she said, I heard you guys have started a new campus or two. And I said, yeah. I said, and she's like, wow, you guys must be knocking it out of the park. And I said, well, we are, with connectivity and things and reaching new people and folks finding their niche. But, leading post-pandemic has its challenges. Like the majority of our people are online and we love that. So we're trying to figure out like, what do we do in person? I mean, people still need the in person, but what's going to make that relevant and real? And then, there are fiscal concerns and all these things. And we have this campus in Uganda. We have this amped campus that has 80 kids in our region that are learning about character development and faith. And like, this stuff costs money. And we're trying to figure out sustainable plans in a new way. Like, you guys give your tithes and your offerings, and I'm so grateful for that. But like, we need to be thinking about funding the church 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Like, it just isn't what it used to be. People don't walk into a church and you pass the offering plate and they give 10% of their income. But 50 to 70 to 100 years ago, that was the norm. That's what people were taught. You give 10% of your income. And lots of people did it. That's not something we even talk about or focus on doing anymore. We talk about giving sacrificially. But like, we have to find a better business model to fund what we're doing if we want to be smart about it. So we've been talking about starting a nonprofit for Amped because it's really bigger than what we're doing, and it's bigger than just Christianity. It is character development. Some schools want to use what we're producing. And so in order to do that, like, it can't be just about it can't be about Jesus. It has to be about character development, which that's okay. And so we've been thinking about how can we keep doing this, and how are we going to, come up with a business plan. And then at the other side of this, we have this campus in Uganda that's like real and legit. Like, they even interviewed Dero for annual conference and played his video. I'll show that to you next week. But I mean, it was a powerful moment. I'm like, this is really real. Like, we have people that are ministering to people in the name of God on the other side of the world in an ongoing manner. And frankly, we need to be paying Dero a salary. The conference asked me, how much is Dero's salary going to be? And I said, well, $200 a month. And they laughed. That seems silly to us, right? But $200 for Dero is a good bit of money, which he deserves because he's working, 20 to 30 hours a week on all this stuff. But we're trying to be creative in what we do. So a long story short, Lexi and Lane had an idea. They are infinitely younger than Dawn and I are. And they're like, these pop-up shops are a real thing. And I said, yeah, I've seen those, be advertised at, like Hoptown or King Canary or whatever. And they're like, no, it's really a thing. And like, what if we did our own? Like, what if we came up with our own brand, and in our spare time, not, during the work day, we came up with products like, and Lane's like, Mom, don't you remember you used to make jewelry? And like, you make candles. And I'm like, yeah. And Dawn and I started talking about it. Dawn and I paid like $45 to $50 each to go to Charlotte and make a candle for our birthdays because they're the day after each other. And we talked about, well, what if we set up an area here at West and we offered these classes to the community, and we offered fellowship, like people pay money to go make candles together or go make jewelry together or go paint together or whatever. And so for the past 2 to 3 months, we've been working on this idea called Soul Creations, spreading universal love. And the logo has a little globe in the middle, and that all of the proceeds from our sales will go half to Amped and half to our Uganda campus. That will only keep enough money to pay for our materials. And so we needed to start to practice to see if we could do this. So like in our spare time and on our days off, we've been like making candles and stained glass and jewelry. And so we actually we're beginning to have a good little bit of inventory. And we've been looking at the Starving Artisans Market and trying to figure out a time that we'll go and have a little booth. And Lexi's like, well, how do we pay for this? And I said, you know what? I'll pay for it. And I'm thinking, I don't really have the money to pay for this, but I also don't have the courage to go ask anybody else for money. So I'll just have a little bit of debt until we start doing it, and then slowly I'll pay myself back. And I didn't realize quite when this started, it was one of those big ideas that I didn't think through all the ramifications. Like, in order to have a class where people make jewelry, you have to have things for them to choose from. So what I thought might be a $500 to $1,000 venture ended up being significantly more. And I'm like, well, I'm not here to be wealthy on earth, and I have enough insurance. Like, if I die, my children will not inherit my debt. And so as long as I'm not like going in debt as to embarrass myself, I'm going to see this as an investment. So we've been working on it on the down low for a couple of months. And just for the last several weeks, I'm like, this is stupid. This is stupid. This is so stupid. I don't know who I think I am. I don't have any business trying to launch another nonprofit that is based on product. And like, this is just dumb. And I don't have the skill set, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. And I certainly don't have the money to keep doing this. And then, like, the owners of Hoptown were so gracious, and some West folks, to meet with me and talk about business plans and help me see, like, a path forward. And I'm like, okay. But then those negative thoughts started again. And honestly, like, early this week, I'm like, I just think I need to put all this stuff on Facebook Marketplace, sell all the supplies, and we need to try a different plan because we don't have the bandwidth to make this happen. And then, ironically, Facebook Messenger, I get this message, and it's from this lady, and she's like, hey, I'm the executrix of so-and-so's estate, and I have a check for you, and I'm putting it in the mail today. And I need you to sign it, and then I need you to have it notarized, and then let me know that you've received it. Now, I thought it was a scam, you know, because they'll do that, and they'll make the emails look like a legit email. So, although I knew the person whose estate they were representing, I mean, this person has been deceased for over a year and a half now. And I certainly didn't know that they left something to the church / my vision. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm happy to do that. Where are you sending the check? Like, do you even have our address? And they never answered that question. So I'm like, this is totally a scam. And then I said, well, how much is the check? Like, I know you probably can't give me the exact amount, but is it like $5, $100? And they wrote back and said it's over $5,000. I was like, okay, well. And then they said, you know, so-and-so was really passionate about all the charity work and mission work that you did and do as a church. And so she just wanted you to use this money wherever you saw fit. And I said, well, she was really passionate about Uganda and wanted to go on this new adventure in Uganda. But she died before we could go because of COVID. And I said, we're trying to start this business. It's actually a nonprofit, but it's going to like have a representative at these, you know, venues and trying to sell things that allow us to become self-sustaining in Uganda and Amped. And she's like, oh my gosh, she would have loved that. And I'm like, okay. So I wrote our finance person. I'm like, apparently we're getting a check. I have some expenses that I've held on to all year because the church didn't have the money, and I figured it was my wild idea, so I just incur the expenses. But since we're getting this money, can I please turn my expenses in? And so I sat down, I went through all my statements and all that stuff, and it came up to an amount. And I'm like, okay, it's going to end up being about what the check is for. On Friday night, our finance person wrote us and said, the check came, and it's for twice what you thought it was going to be. I was like, oh my gosh. And then yesterday, I watched D-Row speak in front of thousands of people at annual conference and talk about the thing that he fell in love with West about is how we reach people and how we care for people. And he told annual conference that when he and his team on Easter, they went and visited the hospitals and took the baby clothes. I was reminded that when we turn our thoughts over to God and we get out of the ruts that powerful things happen. I need to change my thought patterns. And instead of thinking, I can't, and this is stupid, and no one's going to like it, think about what a great opportunity we have. And think about all the things that are in place that enable us to do really amazing things. Will you join with me this week on trying to change the way that you think? I think if we do it together, powerful things can happen. Let us pray. Gracious God, realizing that we need to change our thoughts is a difficult thing, but we can do it because you have given us that power. So may this week we be mindful about what we're thinking and then stop and realize that if it isn't a thought of importance and duration, that we need to just let it go. And that the negativity that we're wired to can be changed and can be transformed. Thank you for giving us a role model and an example and a Savior that modeled positive thoughts in all things, even the worst things. We offer ourselves to you. Amen. Thanks for joining in this morning. I hope you'll practice a week of positivity. Go in peace.